So this is the Sherborn Advisory Committee meeting of February 22nd, 2023. So I declare the meeting open. Let me just read the agenda and then we'll just have a vote to approve the agenda and then we'll get going. So we'll start in the usual fashion with liaison reports. And then for our current meeting items, the primary purpose tonight is just to further discuss selected department budgets, really ones where there were questions and kind of issues that had come up. And this is really meant for us to kind of set up the public hearing. May spill over into discussing warrant articles beyond the omnibus budget, but really primarily that discussion is meant to happen on March 1st and March 8th, when we will have invited all of the proponents of other warrant articles to come talk to us about that. And we'll approve minutes, and that should be the meeting. So does anybody have any changes to the agenda? If not, could I get a motion to accept the agenda as read?
So moved.
Second.
And quick roll call. Nora?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
And Natalie? I'll take that as an aye, and I am aye as well. So that gets us 6-0. Okay, great.
Do you have anyone taking minutes yet?
Yeah, that was the next thing on my list. Thank you. I always write that at the top of the page, and then I always it always slips by me. Volunteer to take minutes tonight.
Can your dog take minutes?
I can ask. She's usually a little reluctant to to actively engage. Somebody? Don't all jump at this great opportunity at once. Jeff, you're muted. We can't hear whatever.
The best thing about joining the select board is Diane takes minutes for us. That was actually the best gig.
I'll do it.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. That'd be great. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. So for liaison reports, I just have one brief thing to mention and then see if anybody else has anything else to bring back to us. I think both Steve and I were recently at the planning board meeting where they talked about the ground mounted solar bylaw change. It's complicated, it's long. I think Steve and I have a general sense of what that's about. We're going to talk about that on March 8th when I'm thinking Chris Owen probably is the one who will be here to talk about that with us. And, we'll all have to form an opinion on it. Happy to talk to anybody offline, as I'm sure Chris Owen would be too, if somebody wants to kind of get some background on that before we actually hear from them on March 8th. Anybody else on liaison reports? Anything to bring in?
I don't have a liaison report, but I just have a question about the warrant. I don't recall having seen the warrant other than the planning board article. Is that something that you could send around, or?
Yes, it is. I should make sure I should probably check in with Jeannie.
I'm interrupting, but it's on the website, the latest one, I think.
Oh, has it been posted, Jeff?
I think it is, but we can double check with Jeannie.
So I'll check tomorrow or maybe Friday morning, and then I will send it around. And I have one I could send now, but mine is already, I know, a little bit out of date. So yeah, thanks, Jane. That's important to do. That'll help everybody. What else?
I just had a question. Is anyone from the high school here? The school? I had a question when I left that meeting last week. They said they were switching their backup generator. If I understood them right, and I might be wrong, switching their backup generator from gasoline to electric. I believe that's what she said. That's one of their projects.
I think, Natalie, I think it wasn't the backup generator. I think it was that as they're doing HVAC stuff, so nobody's heard from them, so we'll have to
Okay,
wait to find out for sure. But what I heard,
Yeah.
what I heard was that, you know, they're putting HVAC units in and they have some backup heat in case, you know, one of the HVAC units goes out, and that backup heat is electric. I don't believe that it was the backup generator.
Oh, okay.
Jeremy, do you have better information on that?
Yeah, I think she was referring to the rooftop units. Most of them are electric, and the backup is natural gas. They're
So I got it
looking to go
backwards.
all electric, but needed to verify that the local distribution system could support that. And if it did, they would go all electric to help with, you know, reducing carbon.
What did you say? The backup what was gas?
The backup heat is part on the rooftop units.
So if we lose, so if they do that and we lose the electrical grid, like an ice storm or something like that, then they have no backup, right?
I don't know the details there. I think they have an electrical generator that may run on diesel.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you, Jeremy. I got it a little bollocksed up. It's the idea of going all electric with the hope, if that works, of being a little bit greener and avoiding the use of natural gas fossil fuels as the backup for some of that equipment. Thanks for catching that, Jeremy. I think, Natalie, they have a backup generator as mentioned. So I don't think they're at risk of, if, you know, power lines go down, that they're completely dead. I think they're okay on that. Anybody else on liaison reports? Okay, so then let's go. So just a minute framing before we get into it. So when we get to the public hearing, we're going to be, of course, considering all of the warrant articles. And we'll also be considering and voting on the omnibus budget. And of course, for items in the omnibus budget, you know, some of them will get bundled as a consent agenda for things that seemingly will not be controversial. Some of the items at the beginning, as we get to kind of dollar amounts for departments and so on, anyone on advisory can all call a hold on one of those budget lines, which means it would be pulled out to be discussed and voted on separately. And then for the items on which there isn't a hold, presumably we vote on the omnibus budget as a whole. But so advisory members can pull items out if there's a desire to have a specific discussion about a particular item at the public hearing, and to vote on that item and make a recommendation on that item separately from just in general voting either to recommend approval or not of the omnibus budget. So the idea of tonight is to kind of talk about some of the budgets that we've heard about, on which questions were raised, on which there were what seemingly concerns. And the idea tonight is not to make decisions. We're not doing that. That will happen at the public hearing, but to kind of get a sense of where members of advisory are, so that if, for instance, there's kind of a general view that, yeah, you know, a particular item should be pulled out, and somebody feels strongly that there should be a hold and that item should be pulled out, so that everybody kind of knows ahead of time that that's coming. If an item is pulled out, every advisory member would have an opportunity to speak on that item. So if we all have a sense of what are some of those items, maybe people on advisory could be a little better prepared to kind of organize their thoughts. And also the department head or the budget maker also would probably appreciate kind of knowing that, hey, there might be a bit more focus and discussion on a particular budget line. So I have some items where I thought we'd want to, where there'd been questions, and it seemed to me that at least we ought to have a discussion about whether anybody felt strongly that that's an item on which there ought to be a hold. There may be others. I didn't hear a whole lot. I heard from a couple of people in response to my email about particular items. Most of the things mentioned already on my list. So the items on my list And this is the order that I propose we discuss them tonight, though if somebody has a conflict or a reason for changing the order, we could do that. But I have Council on Aging, Concom, Select Board, Board of Health, and Sustainability. So we can certainly add to that list if there's more that people want to talk about. But those were the ones that, from talking to people and kind of getting a sense of what concerns were in our prior meetings, those are the ones that I had. Does that sound okay to advisory members to go in that order and proceed that way?
Will you just repeat that? I'm not sure I got them all.
Yeah, of course. So the order that I was intending to go is Council on Aging, Conservation Commission, Select Board Budget, Board of Health, and Sustainability. Another area where I think that there has been ongoing conversations, but that I think we should not talk about tonight, is DPW town buildings. I think, as I mentioned in that email, capital budget, and I think town hall is still working on that. I think coordinating with Jeremy and Sean and so on. And I think that's at a stage where it's premature for us to talk about that. So I think that one we should hold off until one of our next couple meetings. All right, so for some of these, I think there are budget makers or representatives of budget makers who came to make what we hope will be a relatively brief, just kind of presentation, a few thoughts on budget things, maybe just to get us started. They're also here to answer any questions that we have. And again, what I'd like to get is a sense for each of these. Is this something that someone on advisory would feel that they want to call a hold on, so we could kind of know ahead of time that that's coming? I would really, and here I'm quoting the wise words of Steve Tsai, I would really like there not to be big surprises at the public hearing. You know, it's not that we're all going to agree on things. I'm sure in some cases we won't, but that at least we all kind of know what's coming, and there aren't process surprises or people unexpectedly being asked to advocate for a particular item. All right, so Council on Aging. I know that Sue Kelleher can't be here tonight, but I do see Jim Campbell and Pete Foglander here. If either of you want to say a couple short words, well, let me just frame this right. The Council on Aging issue is the increase in hours for the assistant administrator, which is already a benefited position, and a increase in hours for the elder advocate, which would switch that from a non-benefited position to a benefited position. Jim, Pete, if either of you want to just say a few brief words, that'd be great. And then I think advisory members, we should just have a bit of a conversation about what people are thinking about that. Jim, Pete, anything you wanted to offer in? Jim, you're muted. Jim, you're still muted. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you are good.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Jim Campbell. I'm a member of the Council on Aging, and I hope that you got to see the briefing we put together in response to, actually, I think Peter Galatano's comment about return on investment in terms of, supporting the COA staff. We did, by the way, did you, Dan, get to share that briefing we put together with your committee?
I did.
Okay.
I think people had a lot going on today, so okay. I don't know who's looked at it, but I shared it this morning. Okay, thank you. And clearly, we're here to answer any questions on that. We're also in the process of putting together a listing kind of that explains why we need these extra hours for the outreach person, and how important it, as we try to explain to Dan and hopefully to you, is that this person be one person rather than a staff of part-time people. It's really, in my mind, it's really a social worker's kind of position, and trust with your clients, your seniors who are working with is all important, and continuity is important. So
we really think that increase and the sensitivity of that position deserves considering it basically as a full-time position. We're learning that a lot of surrounding towns have the social worker or the outreach person as a full-time position. So, and we can see how important that is. And we also believe that keeping that position and with a strong person, which we currently have, and allowing her the time she needs to do the job is really important in terms of retaining Sherborn seniors, that their families are more comfortable if they believe someone is looking after their needs. They don't have to get them in an assisted living facility in another town. And of course, as our ROI analysis presented, every Sherborn that stays in place is another household that demands less of town services than were it to be sold to a family which has school-age children. And I've, as I told Steve the other night, the Council on Aging, and I think seniors in general in Sherborn all support the idea that we'll pay our share of the cost of the town, including the school system. Our children benefited from the school system, and we want the younger people's children to benefit from that same superior performance. So we're there all the way. We just think that it's important that the town do whatever it can to keep that high percentage of seniors, over half of the households in town.
All right, thanks, Jim. And I met with Sue and Jim and Pete yesterday, and they, I don't know, they worked me over for an hour or so. So it was a good conversation. Good exchange of information. So advisory members, thoughts on this? I think views were a little bit mixed when we last talked about it. Would like to get a sense of kind of what people are thinking, and whether anybody's thinking this is an item that should be pulled out from the omnibus. Peter, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm, again, an advocate of supporting the seniors that have been in town. And I want to make clear, I don't believe that an additional investment would be the sole contributor to whether a senior individual couple stays. It's more economic. Can you cash out and go live in Florida where there's no income tax? Or yet those that are remaining can receive additional services for small dollars that would enhance their lives in town, as do the taxpayers that have children that have that enhancement, and that has been mentioned. Outside of schools and the Council on Aging, there's not much the town provides. You have to go to the dump yourself and throw your trash away. So this is a good investment in that segment of the population. And I'm just repeating myself from the last time we spoke on this. And thank you very much for actually putting it in writing, because that's very helpful.
Great.
But it's an important step that.
Okay, good. Thanks, Peter. Let's see, spinning on around. Steve, thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I don't know that I have a well-formed opinion about it right now. I'm curious to hear what everybody else has to say. I looked at the ROI analysis, which is very interesting, and I thank you for putting all of the effort into that. It was definitely eye-opening. It's good to have, like, obviously I knew conceptually that empty nest households were paying more than their fair share, but it's nice to be able to quantify that and say, okay, well, on average, it's about $10,000 per household per year. I guess to me, the question is just a matter of making that link between, okay, increasing the number of hours for the advocate, that making the connection that says that will lead to X number of seniors remaining, or really it's really the corollary, right? That not having those extra hours will lead to more of them leaving Sherborn, right? And that's, I feel like that would be a very difficult thing to prove one way or the other. So I don't know that, I'm not saying that that is an argument that that this is not a worthwhile increase in the budget. I feel like the data are not sufficient. So I guess I would like to hear what everyone else thinks.
Jane, thoughts?
Yeah, I actually wholeheartedly agree with the gist of the presentation that was put together. I do think that, you know, return on investment for seniors and keeping seniors in town is important. And yet I've been having some discomfort with the proposal on the table. And I was trying to put it all together in my own mind, and it finally crystallized for me just today. And what crystallized in my mind was that I was thinking about the report that was provided to us today and the request that was made for additional hours, and then thinking back to the UMass study. And the piece that seems still to be missing somewhat for me is that, similar to what the police did a few years back when they commissioned a study and then they sort of put together a plan based on the study for what needed to change and why and how it would address the issues in the study. I feel like that's not quite there yet. I mean, I'm not sure that the extra hours in a vacuum, or not completely a vacuum, but just adding some extra hours this year without understanding how that fits into the points that were made in the study and how that fits into any broader thoughts or recommendations or staffing changes that might later be, requested as a result of the study. For me, I think what would make me feel more comfortable is if we could see that comprehensive plan based on the study and based on the needs, and then act on that rather than just kind of piecemeal decide, well, we'll do some more hours this year and that will be good, and then we'll figure out later if we need more. So I think that's where I'm landing. So I guess what that means in terms of what I would suggest at the public hearing is that if this budget, if the Council on Aging still wants to present this budget, I would suggest that there be a hold just so that we could have a discussion at the public hearing about this issue of, do we really have a plan here based on the outcome of an overall plan based on the outcome of the study and any other data that we have.
All right, thanks, Jane. Natalie, thoughts?
I guess, I agree with Jane that is this adding this many hours? I got the impression when they wanted to add this many hours, that wouldn't even be enough. So that's where I think Jane is onto something with a whole plan of what these hours will do. And are they going to need to add hours? Do they have a whole plan on adding services and hours going forward? Because we did talk about, instead of just adding these hours, and making somebody go into a benefited position is maybe giving them another part-time person. And if neither one of them are benefited, you could maybe swap that and they could even get more hours for kind of the same money, but they didn't like that. So I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Natalie. Mike, thoughts?
Yeah, I think my thoughts are pretty consistent with what I said last time, that I think that Council on Aging provides a really valuable service for the town, and for a lot of the points previously mentioned, that if we provide an inadequate service through Council on Aging, then we most likely, I agree with Steve, it's really hard to come up with data for exactly what would happen, or even after the fact, being able to show that because of this, decision, then a certain number of people left. I mean, we would never be able to do that, but just logically in my head, it seems like that would potentially be an added stress that would contribute to someone potentially leaving the town if they're having difficulty and they can't get some assistance through Council on Aging. So I think this is a group that I believe we should be, as a town, supporting, and it seems logical to me that if we have someone in that position who is doing well, and the Council on Aging likes, then offering that person additional hours would probably have more benefit than hiring another part-time person and doing it somewhat piecemeal. And I know during the Council on Aging discussion, they also mentioned the fact that many of the surrounding towns have positions posted and have had difficulty hiring. So I think if we were to go that way, we would probably be in that same boat of not being able to find someone. So this solution just makes sense to me.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Nora?
So I think I always like to be data driven. So when I hear half the town, I'm just wondering, what is that, the 60 plus is half the town when you say half the town, Mr. Campbell? And then also, ideally, I mean, it's a total tax burden, I think, on, real estate taxes. So I just wonder, for example, I think one of them was increasing them by just 1 hour a day. So just going back to what Jane was saying, to kind of look at more of the global picture on that. So anyway, that's something I'd be interested in, is more of that. Is it 50%? Is it over 60, or is it over, just seeing that breakdown a little bit more. And then, the overall tax burden is then putting somebody on with benefits, whether they use them or not, it's still a benefited position. To put them up to 20 hours is just, then it's just, we ideally, yes, I think it's great to say yes to everyone, but it's just, for me, difficult without all the data, I think. So thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Nora. And I guess where I am on this, I think after talking with Jim and Pete and Sue yesterday and seeing a bit more of the data on the services provided and kind of how demand for those services or provision of those services has changed, I kind of came around to about where Mike is, that they're doing some things that are pretty valuable for the town. Jim can correct, so I think that sort of put me into that camp. Jim can correct me on this, but Nora, I believe the answer to your question is that the stats were for 60 and over, and I think it was closer to 40% than 50%. But Jim,
well, yeah, there's all different ways to look at it. We actually found that I think 779 out of the 1,463 tax-paying residents in town, that would include condos as well as whole family houses, over half are actually occupied by seniors. Now, some of those are seniors plus other generations, and we tried to figure, and that's a tough one to figure out. The town clerk data just won't give us that direct information, I think due in part to privacy of, where minors live, and also the inexact capability of their databases to do specific searches like that. But as best we can tell, over half the town's residences that pay taxes, excluding like Woodhaven, are senior occupied. And we try to extrapolate. That's what part of that briefing does, shows that we think about 600 of those houses are seniors only, either a single senior living alone like I do, or a senior couple like Pete Hoagland and his wife are, but with no other kids in the house, no other people in the house. So that's one thing. The other thing I'd like to say is that this increase for hours for this social worker, this outreach position, was requested by the COA staff, by our director, Sue Kelleher, before we started to get into the details of the recommendations of the study, which we're just now doing with an action plan that's looking for more, not less. So I think if Sue were on here tonight, she would come back and say, we need those hours now. And I get that. So that's one point. The second point is, I think that all of us are believing that this particular position of a social worker is not an administrative secretary. It's a person whose trust must be gained by all she needs to gain, the clients, the seniors need to gain the trust of her because they give her confidential data and a lot of health data. And so I really think this is a full-time position. And if this person were to leave, we'd be looking for a full-time position to replace her. I think that it's probably been a mistake to call that a less than 20-hour position from the start. So those are my answers to what I've heard so far. We will take all your comments and try to respond to them between now and your Bloody Saturday, whatever it is.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Peter, brief comment, and then I want to kind of summarize what I think I heard and then sort of wrap this up. Because again, we're not making decisions tonight, so we don't need to try to convince each other tonight. Peter.
Thank you, Dan. It's just a suggestion to have some of the beneficiaries come to the meeting and say, this is what the Council on Aging has done for us, versus looking at numbers, putting a human face to it and seeing the benefit. I see 4,342 to 334 people from 16 to 20 to 22. Let's hear from those folks to say, this makes my life better.
Good idea.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I was struck by those numbers too, with the number of folks that COA has been interacting with and the trend in that over time. So I think what I heard is that this is an item, sounds like not unanimity on advisory, but sounds like there's enough concern and expression of a desire to have this be pulled out at the public hearing. We'll all have a chance to think about it some more. We'll all know that's coming. Jim, Pete, Sue can do some of the work in responding to some of these questions. And, we'll see where that conversation goes. That's when we have to make a decision. We don't have to do that tonight. But so that's what I've heard. If anybody thinks that's the wrong message and I didn't hear it right, speak now. Otherwise, that's kind of what we'll have in mind as what's likely to happen.
Fair enough. Thanks for your comments.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Pete. Appreciate your coming tonight.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. So next one I wanted to talk about was Concom. So I think that's going to be Michael and Courtney. If either of you would like to just say a few brief things to kind of get us started, I think we can sort of handle this the same way, get a sense from you of where things stand, and then kind of spin around and kind of see what people's thoughts are.
Sure. I guess I'll start, and I guess eventually we'll share a screen to give you some more information. As you recall, essentially our total budget came in just about at or maybe a hair below what's considered the level funded budget with the last year plus the COLA. But in our case, we had to do some shifting because we're confronting the issue of how to hire a full-time permanent conservation agent. So we came in with a budget request for a significantly higher salary, and we found some cost savings on the expenses side to balance that. What I guess I'll say is I'll apologize for maybe not having last time to brought up the salary information that we had collected and getting to our budget there, so we can go over that tonight. Because I think if I recall correctly, basically most of the questions were about the level of the salary that might be needed to hire a new permanent agent. And that's what we're in the process of trying to do. And we're doing basically a budget that has what we think might be needed to fill that position. And along the way, we're basically, essentially, we've been talking with Jeremy along the way about what we're thinking about it, since it's a personnel matter. And so he's well appraised of what our thinking are and whether some new ideas are coming up and things like that. And we've discussed, so we recognize that whatever we do will be carefully done with Jeremy and as well as the personnel board to the extent that they are needed. So if I get it straight, the major issue was the salary issue and whether we want to share a screen about some of the information. whether that would be the best next step in this presentation.
Go ahead, Josh. Go ahead and share the screen. Let everybody see that, and then we can.
I guess I'll talk a little, and then maybe Courtney, who did most of this work, is essentially as we had this, we were using the $40 an hour rate, which was what was called into question. We modified. That's a significant increase from the level funded budget. At the same time, we figured with a more skilled person, we can cut back a little bit on the number of hours. So it's a mixture of the two. But part of where we came to we now advertise as up to $40 an hour. To date, we have not gotten many bites at that. We recently had somebody who was interested, and just in the middle of while we were talking to them, they took another job. We're trying to reach out to him to go actually get a debrief as to what the factors were there. So maybe it'll help us in our search. But as you can see here, there are lots of open positions, and there's lots of open positions here that are even having a range that goes above the $40 an hour level. And so and some people don't even necessarily have as much experience at some of the lower salaries as what we're looking for, given our own experience with hiring people who are not that experienced. I don't know, Courtney, did you want to add anything more about this, or talk about Medfield, I guess, or
I mean, this was the spreadsheet that I created back in July when we had this conversation about what we were getting. We were getting no hits in terms of agents. You know, and we went with, we discussed with Vicki Relis, chair of personnel, and Diane Moores, the then interim TA. Vicki kind of did her own salary survey and came up with a similar range of what's out there right now. This has not changed very much. If you just look at what's out there on the MACC job board. And I think partly too, it's just, this is what the market is dictating. We have been basically looking for a conservation agent since 2020, when Allery left. And, you know, it's very hard to get someone with experience. And, you know, we've tried the route of getting someone with no experience or very little experience and training them, but that requires additional cost, consultant costs. So in the end, we came up with a range where, you know, yes, we'd probably be willing to pay a little bit more towards the higher end of 40, if we can get someone with experience. So that's how we arrived at that.
All right. Thanks. I think, Michael, I think you can pull that down.
Yeah.
So why don't we just kind of check in and see what people are thinking? Jane, start with you. And again, we don't have to make decisions tonight, just trying to get a sense of the degree to which people have concerns or think that, you know, what Courtney and Michael suggested is okay.
I actually have a question. Did I misunderstand you, Michael? I thought I heard you say that we had advertised at 40, but had not been getting any bites. Is that what I heard?
We've been advertising it up to 40. We've redone some of the advertising, and we did recently at somebody. We got one bite recently, but that person took another job before we did one preliminary interview. And then they took another job. So we're trying to find out what their experience was. But yes, it's posted for up to 40 right now. And we're trying to figure out what some other ideas about how we can maybe do this. because it would be nice to figure out how to get some actual candidates. I mean, we're doing all right at the moment. We're staffed quite well in terms of dealing with the regulatory stuff, so that we're not holding up anybody's projects. And I think we're doing a good job of customer service on our regulatory side with regard to wetlands protection. But we're a little behind, like a little on minutes and things like that. But we need to figure out some ways and we'll work on more ways to see if we can get some other ways of structuring this, or just getting more candidates in some other ways. But that's a long answer for what, if that answered your question.
Well, no, the reason I asked the question is that, I mean, based on the data that you showed, 40, you know, it might be a little on the higher end of the range, but it doesn't look like it's, you know, extremely high based on those other ranges. But my question is, if we're having some trouble even at 40 or up to 40, you know, and you alluded to this, and I, you know, if you're not ready to talk about it, I don't want to push you, but, you know, are there other options here? You know, could we regional, you know, are there other towns that we could share with, or are there other, I think we're using an outside consult, or, you know, somebody on an hourly basis right now. Is that something that is cost effective for some continued period of time until maybe we find some, you know, I'm just wondering what the other options might be, or if there's a way that this could be solved, not just by, you know, the hourly rate, but by some other more creative solution.
Well, on the regional side, we've had discussions with Jeremy about Medfield. And so we're open to talking to them, but it gets to be the problem of each of these towns. In the past, there were issues of regionalizing when, let's say, two towns had two, let's say, 19-hour positions, and they were having trouble filling it because nobody was doing it. And then maybe you do one full-time position that's shared or something. But in this case, in our preliminary talking with Jeremy, it was a matter of, well, each town has significant needs. It's going to be a full-time position. Each town needs more than half. So how do you then split it? Or you try to find a way where you might have an agent and then an assistant agent. You can get into some other alternatives that we're beginning to think about, that for the sake of that would require some work with the personnel board and some other job description work, which will go beyond, let's say, what we're doing right here and now, but we will probably be doing that in the process while the town is going through this budget and town meeting. But I think maybe there are some issues of looking into maybe an assistant agent with a much more limited senior agent or something like that I think we will be working on. I don't know, we're going to have to come back that the salary needs to be even a little higher, but it'll be what it has to be in a way, and we'll be working with Jeremy and personnel on it. So I'm not sure in this place here whether this is the place to necessarily brainstorm it. We've been talking about it as a personnel matter. It gets a little more complicated, as opposed to the fact that I'll say we're trying to be creative and think about it. And we don't know where this will all come out.
So Jane, do you have a view one way or another at this point, or still kind of taking information in?
Well, I guess I would say that I do appreciate that the expenses have been cut back, you know, to sort of balance this, and that the overall budget increase is not, you know, particularly high. And the $40 an hour, based on, you know, the data that we just saw, does not look like it's, you know, really out of line. So at this point, I think I'm inclined to not be, you know, as concerned about this.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thanks. Natalie, what are you thinking?
I'm not concerned about it.
Okay. Peter?
Yeah, just a question, Michael. How are you achieving the ComCon goals now without this position?
Well, we have somebody filling it. just at not the level that we need. We're not doing certain things on land management aren't happening. Certain other things are not happening. There are some parts of the regulatory stuff that all the basic regulatory stuff is being covered and being filled in by others. Courtney goes around and does some of the work, for example. It's a greater burden for myself and her and some others. So therefore it's a shared burden. And so.
And Michael, the sense in which the current person who's filling in isn't doing all of that is that she's not working full time because she has other commitments. So you know, she's doing the regulatory stuff part-time and not doing the rest of what a full-time person would be doing to do the land management and all the other pieces of it, if that's a fair way to put it.
Yeah, well, there's ways to get it done where basically not every single thing is done as what I think would be best, but we're coping in the short run.
Yeah. Peter, any last comment?
No, I was just saying that what you're doing now, if it's successful or partially successful, could lead to an alternative that would work, aside from trying to find a full-time position, which you're not.
But I guess I'm not fully understanding the question. Like, should I keep doing site visits and stuff? Because what we're doing is not successful with this number of hours.
Are you being paid now, or is it just your position on the ComCon?
I'm a volunteer on the ComCon.
Right. So convert that to being paid, and would that entice you to do this happily?
I'm not qualified to do this, and as we can tell, it is very hard. This competition is stiff out there for qualified agents. So
is there a program that people come out of higher education that you can start before they're while they're being educated?
Do you mean like pulling in an intern or something, Peter?
Going to the schools that train these individuals and getting them just before graduation, or enticing them, or baiting the hook, so that I'm just throwing out suggestions.
Yeah, I get it. Like that's what I was doing in my day job, hitting up schools, trying to snatch people up. But unfortunately, this is like a really niche position, and you know, a lot of people come out with like degrees in environmental sciences, but it's also not the kind of job that you can walk right into with your BA. You know, like I think there have been some people that worked at, you know, what's the word, Michael? Like
consulting firm, basically consulting firm.
Worked in a firm for a few years and then maybe switched over to this, or, you know, started as like an assistant or something. But also consulting firms are going to pay a lot more than we are. So.
Of the 776 senior households, is there any retired ComCon commissioners that could step in?
They have not stepped up. Yeah. We have done it before. We've used up some people in the past, and people are not willing to do that. But we have trouble just finding conservation commissioners.
Peter, you are a font of ideas tonight. Thanks.
If anybody here wants to join the conservation commission,
Peter,
after you leave this.
Advisory soon. Are you interested in conservation issues? Because we're probably going to need new members soon.
I'll send my resume.
All right. So that sounds like good.
I'll just add the fact that you're more realistically, Peter. Yes, we try to think through some of the idea of the assistant agent role, where there's a way to do it without losing, without it costing too much for the training and stuff like that. So that's one of the things we were thinking about for somebody. So we're trying to expand how we do it and do that.
Okay. Let's just keep quickly spinning around and giving everybody a chance to weigh in. Nora, thoughts?
My first thought is Indeed is a great hiring place. But then I think that if we do, how many hours is the current, is it a contracted person, and how many hours and what's the pay there for that? Is it, are they working 20 hours, 30 hours? Is there a contract person now that's doing?
They're working on an hourly level. I'm not sure where this is all going, but it's 15.
No, I'm just curious. Yeah.
15 to 20 hours a week. And she is amazingly accepting a lower salary because she's helping out, but in this, I think it's 35 or 36, but I think there's some issue of that. She would like to see that increase because she's well worth it. She could easily, as in the past, other people have charged consulting rates that are much higher, but she's a part-time employee at the moment and is just for some reason she loves working here and has been, and it's helped out on and off over many years here in town over the last 5 or 6 at different times when we've needed it.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure.
Let's see, Mike, I think you're the last one to come to.
Are there surrounding towns that have these positions, and do we know what those people are paid?
Well, that was part of the table there, and some are still trying to hire, and they, like Framingham and Medfield, have advertised for lower salary. So we have, and they've had openings there. Dover has a consultant, and it's hard to find the actual rate even when I asked, but I have a feeling it's quite high. They have quite a high budget from when you look at the aggregate there. So we have some of that, and we have the evidence of what is being advertised out there.
Yeah, we've also, I mean, we know some agents through them working here in the past, or just connections through, you know, Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions, and it kind of confirms this is a really tough market. Some of them would not leave their jobs for this little money.
Yeah, we've had to hire a number of times in the past, and this is by far, I mean, I've been on this commission for various reasons. I've been on this commission for over 10 years and gone through a number of hiring processes, and this is by far the tightest market I've ever seen and stuff in the past. It's surprising me.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I think that got us around. So I think I didn't hear, I'm not sure I got this right, but I didn't really hear anybody who's really set on a hold here, which doesn't mean it can't happen, because of course, you know, we'll get to the public hearing, but as kind of a preliminary read, am I right on that? Am I misreading? Is there somebody who's thinking we'd want to pull this one out? Okay. Again, public hearing is the public hearing, and that's when all this actually happens. But this is super valuable for all of us to kind of hear this, have this conversation now as kind of a prelim to public hearing. But I'm not hearing anybody who is thinking this needs to be pulled out of the omnibus for the public hearing. We'll see where we go when we get there, but that's
if people come up with after tonight, if you have anybody has any issues, let us know. We're more than happy to try to work on this to make things go as smoothly as possible, since obviously we're dealing with an uncertainty that there's nothing much we could say other than we have to start playing around a little bit more, and that's our job.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Courtney. Appreciate your coming in and walking us through all of this and answering questions. Okay, so the next one we wanted to talk about was the select board budget. That is a change from the earlier version of the select board budget that we saw, and the principal change being, well, a couple changes. The assistant town administrator getting a new job description, which folds in significant HR responsibilities and also a pay increase. Some other items being reduced, some consulting that was being used to fill in what now the assistant TA would be doing, and some other modest changes in the budget. So as I mentioned in that email, this has actually been in train since the fall, and the select board, I think on their January 5th meeting, discussed this. I think we didn't get wind of it until recently. I wasn't at that meeting, and I believe Steve wasn't at that meeting. So it didn't kind of come to advisory's attention till more recently. But I think it's been in train for a while with the select board, personnel board, and Jeremy all having played a role in kind of getting this organized. So I see Jeremy and Jeff here. If either of you want to say a few words about this, that would be great. And then we can just, again, do a quick kind of round robin and just kind of check in and see what people are thinking on advisory.
You want to go first, Jeremy, or do you want me to?
Either way, Jeff, I'm fine. Go ahead, Jeff.
Go ahead. All right. Well, basically what we did is we knew last year, in last year's select board budget, that we didn't, we basically delegated everything to David Williams, and it was way too many things to delegate. And so we designated, and you can see it was in the 23 budget, $10,000 for HR support, because we really, the personnel board has had challenges recently. There was 2 members for a while. There's 3 now, but normally it's been 5. And HR is a dramatically changing role, I think, in many companies and towns. So we felt we were understaffing the HR function from the get-go. So that's why we did that last year. We also this year did the salary survey. I'm not sure if Dan had a chance to share it with everyone, but we knew that we were underpaying Diane for her current role. She's been assistant.
I did share that, Jeff. So everybody has that.
So she's been assistant town administrator for 18 years for Sherborn. So pretty long time, pretty seasoned. So she was very below her level. So we decided to combine that consulting HR support and have a full-time HR director, because there was crazy things that weren't going on. We weren't even getting performance evaluations recorded in the select board's office from all the departments. They were maybe created, but there's a lot of things falling through the cracks that David Williams hadn't had time to do. So anyway, we wanted to strengthen HR, and we wanted to, you can see that Diane's salary was way below the market. She was, making around $80,000, and the salary survey is much higher than that. So that's what we decided was appropriate. And maybe Jeremy has the advantage of having been in Natick and being on the advisory equivalent in Medfield. So do you want to add anything, Jeremy?
Yeah, sure. So the assistant town administrator is actually one of the few full-time employees in town hall. She's required to be on call 24/7 and attend night meetings, as a key member of the senior management team, actually acts as the town administrator in times of absence or vacancy. So it's a high level position. And it appears that, to address some of the things that Jeff mentioned earlier with some sort of shortfalls or non-capacity in the HR function, there was some updates to the town's general bylaws that actually updated the town administrator's job duties. And one of those was that the town administrator shall appoint a qualified human resource professional. Pretty prescriptive that there needed to be more support in that role. So to help sort of address that bylaw, we've worked to update the assistant town administrator's job description to include the HR director position. Our consultant has helped with that. She did some market research. She also gathered job descriptions from other communities, peer communities that have a similar model. And helped inform that job description. which has been vetted with the select board. The select board have, voted to support this upgrade to this position. We've had meetings with the personnel board as well, and they voted to support and to amend the personnel administration plan. In looking at this position and looking at the job description, it was kind of eye-opening for me to see there's an appendix A in the personnel administration plan that's supposed to list all non-union employees. Well, it's pretty dated. And actually the assistant town administrator position wasn't even in it. So at a minimum, we needed to add her position anyway. So, in this new role, the assistant town administrator, HR director is going to help us clean up, be more consistent across the board with HR related items. In the past, it seems that sort of some of those roles have maybe been a little ill-defined and delegated to department heads, individual boards, and with a bit of input here and there from the personnel board. So yeah, this is an attempt and a good one to professionalize the way that we approach our HR functions, be more consistent, and to add support in that role to limit it, to help minimize some liabilities that have cropped up. So we've resubmitted the select board budget to accommodate that upgraded position and salary, and tried to offset some of that increase by way of limiting some of the expenses and other line items in the select board budget.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Jeremy. Let's just do a quick spin around and get a sense of what people are thinking. Steve, you want to start?
Sure. I guess my general position on this type of thing where, we're talking about the salary of a department head or some other, exempt employee, or honestly, even determining the salary and hourly rate. It's my position, generally speaking, is that it's not within the purview of the advisory committee to be questioning those salaries, right? It's up to the select board if you guys are the ones negotiating a contract, or the personnel board, or whoever. And ultimately it lands in our lap, and then we just kind of, we have to deal with it, right? Like we don't really question the salary that has been negotiated for the town administrator, for the various department heads, et cetera, et cetera. It's just kind of like, okay, we got a new chief and here's the new salary. There you go. So from that perspective, I'm kind of like, whatever, it is what it is. You guys decided to do that. And I think that your logic and your justification is sound. Mostly I'm just vaguely annoyed at the fact that this was something that the select board had been working on, obviously had in the back of their mind, but still at both the January 14th Saturday meeting of the select board, and then on the January 18th meeting where the select board budget was presented to advisory, there was no indication that this was coming. And so after those presentations that, now suddenly it's like there's a pretty significant change. To me, it's just kind of a matter of, as an advisory committee member, it's like throughout the season, I have in the back of my mind, like, all right, well, what is the overall budget doing? Various departments are up, they're down. Where can we try to save some money? And then now to have a department that we thought was sort of already all tied up to suddenly come back and be like, oh no, actually we lied, there's a significant increase, like that just throws off our process is all. So that's my only real comment. I'm fine with the change. I'm fine with the process that backed up the change. I don't generally question the salaries that are come up with. It's just a matter of trying to make our life easier by not throwing us a curveball.
Jeff, you want to jump in for a minute, and then we'll keep going around.
Yeah, I can address that. I mean, Steve makes a very valid point, but what I would say is we were busy trying to hire a town administrator. So we felt that we wouldn't finalize any of that until the new town administrator was on board and somewhat up to speed and could weigh in on the decision also. So we weren't doing it in November, and that's why we were, Jeremy started, was it December 3rd, Jeremy? I forget what day it was, but I think it was December 3rd, whatever the Monday was. So it been in the works, but we've been busy, but it was also because we wanted the new town administrator, and we had to confirm that that person had the ability, which was voted at last year's town meeting, to make this appointment. So the HR portion of it. So that's my excuse. I'm sticking to it.
Thanks. You know, I would just chime in that I had a similar reaction to Steve's when I first saw that budget with the changes. I thought, what, where, what, huh, what? You know, not having heard anything about it previously. So, you know, just in terms of process, it just, as Steve said, it makes it a little harder for us to kind of get everything to go. Okay, so let's keep going. Jane, how about you? Thoughts?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this. And first of all, not to pile on, but you know, this budget was presented last month, and Jeremy was here, and you know, the need for an HR specialist has been known for quite some time. So you know, this is not new information that came up within the past month. So you know, I just have to second or third, I guess, what has been said about the disappointment of having this hit us now. I agree with Steve that I don't think it's up to advisory to decide what an appropriate salary is for a particular job. But I will say that, and I apologies because I did look, you know, I looked for a LinkedIn profile for the incumbent. I couldn't find one, and I honestly have not seen her resume, and I don't know what her prior work history is. But I did look up every one of the current incumbents in the towns that are listed here in this report. And some of them are assistant town managers, which is a somewhat different job. And without exception, all the others have MBAs or MPAs or many years of HR professional experience. And, you know, it may just be my ignorance. Perhaps, you know, Diane has that level of qualification or experience or expertise, and I just don't know it. But you know, based on what I know of her work in the town, I was not aware that she was an HR, you know, had HR expertise or an HR, you know, education or expertise or anything like that. And, you know, I don't need to tell you that if we're going to have an HR expert, it's got to be someone who's an HR expert, because mistakes in that area can really cause a lot of trouble in terms of, you know, potential litigation or whatever it may be. So I'm, you know, I don't know what I don't make up salaries, but I do know that the people who are getting these higher salaries that are listed have very high educational and professional experience in this area. And I'm not sure that we have an apples to apples situation. And that's no disrespect to Diane. It's just, you know, a factual question as to what her professional experience and education is as compared to some of these others. And then the other thing is that in the budget that was presented last month, we had a $10,000 line item for HR support. And even if we look at that consulting services line that's gone from $19,000 to $12,000, that's another $7,000. We're looking at $17,000 for HR as compared to the 38 that is currently being asked for Diane. So why we would, you know, go from paying 17 for certain services to paying 38 for certain services for someone who may not be as much of an expert as the consultant that we were going to originally get the services from, that is just baffling to me.
Okay. Thanks, Jane. Looks like Jeff wants to provide some input. Go ahead, Jeff.
You listened to half my argument, Jane. Half it is adding the HR director, but that's not, the salary is not based on adding the HR director role. We were grossly underpaying Diane previously. And I don't think she has an MBA, but she has 18 years experience with our town and then prior experience with other towns. So it's not only an HR increase. It's an increase because her salary had never increased in 18 years other than COLA.
But Jeff, this is
for all town employees who are not on contract.
I'm done, Jane. I'm done.
Jane, does that get you to the end of where you want what you wanted to?
I've said what I wanted to say.
Okay, good. Okay, thanks, Jane. I was going to go to Peter next.
Yeah, it sounds like we're throwing money at a problem that was a management problem not getting reviews in. No one likes to do reviews. They're onerous. The recipient and the giver don't like to do it. They won't do it. It's human nature. We haven't had them done. We bestowed the HR director on the former town administrator, which was probably overburdened him from what I get. And now we're shifting it to maybe overburdening the assistant town administrator and throwing more money at it. But I don't get a sense that the problem is going to be solved.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. Let's see, let's keep going. Losing track now of Mike, thoughts?
As someone who kind of works in the HR realm, I guess I kind of second some of Jane's thoughts that I would be curious to know if this person is knowledgeable of HR concepts, and if there is any kind of lacking expertise, is there a plan to beef up her expertise? Just because like Jane said, it's an evolving field where things change year to year, and even someone who was working in HR 5 or 10 years ago would really need to kind of get up to speed. So if I would be curious to know what level of expertise they have and if there's a plan to beef that up.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Nora?
Yeah, I'm conflicted and need more information, I guess is what my comment is. It's the same questions are popping up in my head.
Same thing that others have asked about.
Yeah, it says Jane, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Natalie?
This proposal is that this person will become the town's human resources administrator. Is that correct?
Correct.
With all that entails legally and, right? That's true, Jeremy? Okay.
That's correct.
Well.
Yeah, can I clarify that, Dan?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
The personnel board sets policies. The thing about HR in any town is there's a personnel bylaw, and then there's also other bylaws that apply. So it's not like a corporate HR department. So the personnel board sets the HR policies for town, and sometimes it requires a town meeting vote if it's something that changes the bylaw. This person is the person is managing to that plan and making sure that we're compliant with that plan. She's also, in the last at least 10 years, helped select the healthcare benefit plan and meets with all the consultants that determined what benefit plans were offered to town employees. So that's certainly an HR function. So she's not totally in charge of it because the personnel board has a role in town, but just like advisory and every other board, they're volunteers and they're understaffed, and it's becoming more complex. So it's a combination of the two, not she's not directing everything. The personnel board still has a function.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. I guess I think I'm in about the same place that Steve is, that feels to me like it's not advisories. The salaries determined by select board, town administrator, and feeling like it's not exactly advisory's role to step in on that. That being said, certainly heard some concerns expressed. Do those concerns come forth in the level of this is an item where people are thinking they'd want to have a hold and pull this out at the public hearing? Certainly, I think there's some interest in some additional information.
think this deserves some more consideration at the public hearing.
Yeah, okay. All right. All right, so I think that gets us about as far as we can get on that. And maybe some few more things, some additional information that might be helpful for advisory as we, over the next few weeks as we get closer to the public hearing. As I said, I think I'm where Steve is. I think I'd be fine with this, but understand that that's not where everyone else on advisory is. Okay, so unless there's something more on that, let's go on to Board of Health. And thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Jeff, for contributing to our to use the phrase I've used in the past, our wide-ranging discussion on that topic. You'll see that popping up in advisory minutes from time to time when we have wide-ranging discussions. So thanks for contributing to that. Okay.
Thank you for including us.
Yeah, absolutely. Made good sense to do that, and good to have some of that conversation now and here rather than all popping up for the first time at the public hearing. Okay, so on to the Board of Health, where I think the primary issue is health administrators' salary, which was a change from fiscal 23 by an expansion of hours, with some discussion of a possible further change in title and salary perhaps down the road. Lots of questions that were raised about whether the health administrator was salary, hourly, back to salary, and all of that, and just sort of where we are and where we are in the process in terms of personnel board, working with the town administrator, and so on. So, Daryl, thank you for joining in. You had said to me you wanted to offer some kind of brief comments, and then we'll do kind of a spin around the room to see what people are thinking.
Okay, so the town administrator and I got a chance to talk about the outstanding issues. So Jeremy, feel free to fill in any parts I go over too quickly in your opinion, although I am going to try and be brief. We talked about salary versus hourly, the change that was made, not a choice. I mean, again, Board of Health was not aware of, nor did we have strong opinions on salary versus hourly, because frankly, on one level, if we took her standard number of hours, assuming no overtime, and multiplied her hourly rate, that equals her salary. And so if one feels that the job could fit in the hours, but that is a big question, then it would be the same in terms of cost. In terms of whether exempt or non-exempt status is more appropriate, we're fine with whatever the town feels is best, but really long range, we'd like to see, and in the short term, like to see the salary adjusted for the town administrator. The HR study certainly indicated that. It seems like it's going to be a bit complex because there was discussion today about overall revamping of personnel policies and categories for pay scales and that sort of thing. I'm a bit concerned that the Board of Health Administrator / Director, which is really the function she serves by comparison of her job description to other towns, is just so far below the standard. And this is someone who's very experienced and I don't believe has ever gotten a merit salary increase over all the time she's been here, which is over 30 years. So other than COLA. And she is extremely good at her job. She's recognized by many as being very good in her job, including all the boards that have worked with her. When the town did a salary survey some number of years ago, we asked why there wasn't anything for Board of Health, and they said it was because Board of Health has authority over its staff, and therefore that's something that we could do. And again, I know that that was a quantum step in some salaries for selected positions. I don't know what the mechanisms might be to do that for the Board of Health. We do also have the benefit of very routine, annual in almost all cases, except for 2020. And I don't know if there were any other years before my time of doing the performance evaluations for Board of Health staff, but we have a file with those over a very long period of time. And one other thing about Ellen has been in her role for a long time, and I think that's also part of the reason that her salary is so misaligned with the market and with what other comparable towns are doing, is because we haven't had to refill the position, and that would up the salary. So that, I think, dynamic has happened in other departments, but not for the Board of Health. So I think that's all. That's my summary.
Thanks, Daryl.
Jeremy, did I miss anything critical or useful?
No, Daryl, I think that was a pretty good summary of what we chatted about today.
Okay, thanks. Daryl, is Ellen's status currently exempt or non-exempt? What's her current status?
Currently, because it was changed at some point, she is non-exempt. She is paid on an hourly basis at the moment.
And is she getting overtime as being a non-exempt employee, either the additional hours or at a higher rate for the overtime hours?
Yes, for hours over 40 hours a week.
And so being paid for those, and is it 1.5 times normal rate?
Yes.
Okay.
Although her salary, her former salary, we proposed to up it to 40 hours a week and then base her salary on that. It was 35 hours a week. So she would get 5 extra hours, get the pay for that. And then if it was over 40, it would be time and a half.
And so the FY23 budget number, I'm just looking now. I'm not sharing my screen.
That is her hourly, the one we proposed.
Yeah.
We proposed, not the one that was automatically generated. What we proposed was 40 hours a week at her standard hourly rate plus the COLA.
And then presumably being non-exempt and no overtime, or being exempt with overtime?
Presumably that would be a salary.
Okay.
Again, assuming no overtime, it comes out to be the same, but
yeah,
as a dollar figure.
Yeah. And the FY23 number includes any overtime that occurred in that year, the FY23 salary number. Is that?
Yes.
Okay, good, thanks. Okay, just wanted
but that also illustrates she's putting in a lot of extra time for increasing demands for services and requirements, new requirements all the time for public health. And she's bearing the burden of meeting the gap between staffing and demands.
Okay, good, thanks. So let's see where people are on this. Jane, start with you.
Oh, I have a lot of questions and concerns about this, mainly because of this general confusion, or maybe it's not confusion, it's just a little messy in terms of the status of Ellen's position. She was exempt, but then she got tens of thousands of dollars worth of overtime, I guess because of special COVID special COVID money and the ways in which that money could be used. I think that was a special case, perhaps, based on the potential uses for that money. She's now apparently non-exempt, but she's being compared in the salary study with people. Again, I searched for not every single one of these towns, but the incumbents in most of these towns. these are people, most of these people have master's degrees. They have many, you know, or all kinds of certifications for, you know, public health inspectors or sanitarians. They're obviously doing a lot of the work that we are paying other people to do, because in some cases there's only one FTE in these towns. So that has to mean that they are doing food inspections or they are doing other types of work. You're shaking your head, Daryl, but I mean, these are just facts.
I am, because I know the towns. We know the towns. We know what they're doing. That is not how some of the towns do what you say, but not in the study.
You know, this is not to argue, but I think we've got an apples and orange situation here. I don't think that a non-exempt employee, you know, again, I couldn't find a LinkedIn profile. So I will admit, I haven't seen Ellen's resume or her background or her education or her professional experience before she was with the town. But, you know, I do think it appears that there's somewhat of an apples and oranges comparison here based on the work and the qualifications and the history and the professional experience that these other folks have in these other towns, and Ellen's situation. And I also think that this whole exempt, non-exempt is messy, and to go from, you know, exempt to a brief non-exempt and then back to exempt again, I think that's potentially fraught for a lot of reasons. Going back to some of the HR issues we were just talking about. And I think it's a dangerous thing to do right now. And so we can get—
I am not arguing that it should remain in this non-exempt status. Again, not a call I made, not a call I was involved, or anyone on the Board of Health was aware that that's what was being done to carry it out. And it was also apparently consistent what was done for other people who were also paid during COVID for their COVID overtime hours. So that's a town level issue. That's not a Board of Health issue. I'd like to view this from Ellen being salaried again. And that's the issue. And also, we attend conferences and training sessions with people from other towns. We have reason to communicate with people in other towns. So we do know what they are doing. And there are a mix of things. Sometimes some health directors will do the site work for septic, for example, but then they have more support staff doing the other things. They can't do it all. There's different skill sets. So I don't want to go into it because I've been doing this for over a decade. I understand it.
Yeah. Thanks, Daryl. I want to make sure we just kind of get around to everybody here and kind of hear where people are on things. Jane, more that you wanted to talk about here?
No, I've voiced my concerns.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Peter, let's go to you.
Yes, the having gone through the Obama exempt and moving the salary range up, we did a whole survey of employees at one point, and it's very prescriptive. So that is concerning to me. And Daryl, I hear you. It was a town decision, but for this position, we should step back and depersonalize it and look at the market and the qualifications for the position. And that tends to be a personnel board issue, which they may have weighed in already on this. But those are some of my input, is to look at the needs of the town, the requirements of the job, and not necessarily the individual.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Natalie, let's go to you.
I don't have, other people have expressed my concerns, so I don't need to repeat them. Okay. But I do have one question. I have the Medway Department of Health budget in front of me that's exactly the same as ours. And Medway has 3 times as many people. Is that, you talk to these people, right, Daryl? How do we have the same budget that a town that's 3 times our size?
I'm not familiar with Medway, but what you would need to check is whether they have public water and or public sewer. That makes it entirely different because then all water and sewer issues are covered by usually the Department of Public Works or sometimes a special department, especially for those functions. That is by far the majority of what we work on in town, and it's very time consuming to go on a property by property basis for managing that.
Okay. And Natalie, it sounded like from your opening comment that you, as you said, you didn't want to repeat stuff, but shared some of the other concerns that had been raised.
That is correct, Dan.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Steve, what are you thinking?
I guess I have a few questions. One, so Daryl, I heard you say, so you're proposing that as part of this budget that you also want to change the position back to exempt. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. And then I guess my question is also, so who is actually in charge of determining the position in terms of the job description, the hiring, the salary, the performance review? Is that entirely under the Board of Health, or does the TA and Personnel Board have any purview over that?
We have prepared job descriptions for all of the staff that we have. Several have been recent. They've all been updated within the last X number of years, not that much of time, especially since we just had to advertise for a new food and camp inspector. So that's only a few years old. Prior to that, we went out to bid again for health agent. So it was revamped at that time. And we also updated Ellen's and recently reviewed it, but it didn't need any additions. So we have up-to-date job descriptions. We've shared those with the Personnel Board because we went and spoke to them before hirings and for other reasons. We've met with them over the years on each of these positions.
So in the scenario where, let's say, Ellen just decided to retire tomorrow and now you had to hire somebody to replace her, would that whole process, job search, interview, hiring decision, would that all be entirely Board of Health, or would that be TA?
I believe so. That's how all of our other hirings have been.
Yeah. Because I guess for me, it's similar to my previous comments about how it's not the it's advisory committee's job to decide what is an appropriate salary and job description for a particular role and who to hire for it. I feel like that sort of applies here also. I think one of the things that makes me uncomfortable is the sort of like the state of flux in this position right now. And I think when a few weeks ago, when you guys first came and presented your budget, you had said that literally that same week was when you had gotten the report from your consultants. And so it seemed like something that was a very dynamic process. And I think that just makes me concerned about, okay, are we following the appropriate process to determine what should her role be, what should her title be, and what should her salary be? I'm not saying that you aren't doing that. I'm just not, it seems like a little bit more haphazard than I would like it to be, I think a lot of the other sort of job roles in town, especially if they're getting a significant upgrade and a title change, they do go through a whole process with the TA and the Personnel Board. That's why I was sort of asking who is kind of overseeing this role. So I guess I would be more comfortable knowing that a process was in place that involved in some way the TA and the Personnel Board to determine that, okay, yes, this is the appropriate thing and this is how we're going to implement it. That said, I'm like, I trust that the salary level that Ellen is at, in FY23 is too low, and that after this process of determining what is appropriate is all done, it is going to be probably significantly higher than it is. And I can recognize the idea that in some sort of stepwise fashion that she probably deserves a significant raise for FY24. it just becomes a matter of, okay, do we have an idea of what that, and maybe your $73,000, that's totally appropriate, maybe, but I kind of want to know, okay, well, what is the procedure that is going to happen from here on out to determine, does she get a title change to Director of Public Health, and is there a change in the job description, and essentially, I just want to know that roadmap is there and that it is going to be followed. Because I think in private, Dan and I have had conversations about the general sense of unease that a lot of positions in town are getting changed, are getting upgraded, their salaries are going up, and it seems a little bit haphazard, like there isn't a centralized plan in place. And that is not a criticism of Jeremy, who has literally just started this job, but it's kind of one of those things where I'm kind of like, I would like to have the town administrator kind of like rein everything in and have a more structured, organized plan for everything, and to know that that is in place. And maybe Jeremy's about to say that, yes, that is in place, but that's kind of what I want to hear before saying, sure, you get a raise, this person gets a raise, everybody gets a raise, yay,
Thanks, Steve. So Jeremy, let's go to you, and maybe you can speak also to Steve's question about what's the process and what's the role of town administrator and personnel board with respect to Board of Health employees.
Well, thanks, Dan. I guess I'd like to speak a little bit more generally about the personnel administration plan, which does include in Appendix A, does list the Board of Health administrator position, but your town meeting last spring updated the personnel administration plan, which is part of the town's general bylaw, and it added the allowance that the Appendix A, which is the listing of positions by classification, so listing of positions and then classifications, which classifications should be like positions of a certain pay scale. In any event, you updated your bylaw to allow that plan to be updated, Appendix A of that plan to be updated from time to time by the town administrator with the consent of the personnel board. So I think that right there kind of gives you sort of the direction that your bylaws seem to indicate. Updates to the personnel administration plan and Appendix A, the listing of positions, would generally take, would be, working with what I'm hoping to build in town hall, a team of professionals, including the assistant town administrator, HR director, to support me with being consistent in the way that we approach these things. These ad hoc things, I think, are coming at you necessarily because there's been somewhat of a void, and it has been decentralized. So what I would hope to do, and I've, I think the select board has noticed this in the last several years, and again, kind of one of the reasons they had brought forward the idea to help beef up our resources in the HR realm by adding some responsibilities for the assistant town administrator to support the town administrator, was because of this inconsistency that was being shown. So I look around the town administrator's office and I look to see where all the job descriptions are located for all the town staff. We don't have an inventory. I appreciate that, there has been updates of job descriptions that have been done, but there's no master inventory. That there's a form of how the job description should be on the town's website. It includes the signature of the town administrator, includes the director of that department, and includes the chair of the personnel board. There should be a file full of those with the current dates. That doesn't exist. It should exist. Diane and I are laying out a plan and working with the personnel board so that over the coming year or so, more consistency will be put in place to address, the last three topics that your advisory just talked about, to bring more consistency some more standards, some more just across the board, some more transparency. So
Okay.
Hopefully that helps. I mean, that's my game plan, and that's, you know, part of the goals that I'm developing to discuss with the select board. And you know, that's right at the top of my list. You look on the whiteboard in my office, personnel administration plan. It's right up there. But I need a team and support to carry that forward.
Thanks, Jeremy. And I have seen I have taken note of that at the top of your whiteboard. And as you know, as you're hearing tonight, it sounds like advisory will be very enthusiastic about progress that gets made in that dimension. So, Jeremy, I heard what I heard, if I got it right, is that your sense is that kind of Board of Health employees, while of course it's an elected board and different than other town employees in that respect, would still kind of run through the procedures and policies that you mentioned.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, and actually one of the tasks that the select board had given me was to help create an org chart for the community, and I think that actually helps with discussions like this. So I've been putting together, with the help of Diane and others, an org chart. I've got 2 different versions, a higher level and one by position. You know, a draft as I've sent out to Jeff. You know, shortly it'll be distributed at a wider range, but I think seeing things graphically like that might help with discussions like this of where things fall. And, you know, there's departments that have a department head that's appointed by a committee or a board, you know, and that's certainly their responsibility. But, you know, there's also staff and, like, you know, daily operations of any organization that kind of more generally fall on the town's or the organization's HR office. So I think there's overlap there with, you know, policy boards, you know, providing and you know, appointing, you know, a lead and directing, you know, sort of the policy aspects of those departments, but then there's sort of the daily routine HR functions and the like that necessarily an organization should standardize and consolidate to some degree.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. Daryl, did you want to get in with a couple of quick comments, and then I want to get to other people?
Here's the org chart.
I'm taking a screenshot so I can get a closer look.
Biggest drawback is it's not 8.5 by 11, as you can see.
Daryl, did you want to get some?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed meeting with Jeremy and hearing about a plan to do something organized and consistent and what have you. I will say that for over the last 6-7 years, I've been working on personnel issues, trying to go through all the standard channels, trying to follow whatever the process might be, being bounced back and forth. And this is no complaint to anybody, because I think it's because we had a lack of a process, a well-defined process. So I'd go to one group, be pointed to speak to the other, and back and forth, and couldn't get anywhere on some of these issues. So I'm not trying to be ad hoc about this. I'm not trying to go out of turn, out of line. When we did want to be part of the salary survey, we were not, and told to do it on our own because we were autonomous. So we're not trying to circumvent anything. I understand it'll take a long time, but I feel that there is an issue with how we are compensating this employee, and it's been a long-standing issue. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Daryl. Nora, let's come to you.
Thank you. Basically, the combination of what we're all talking about, and that's all I really have to say, not to belabor it, but.
Okay, so it sounds like you're sharing many of the thoughts that other people have expressed.
Yes, thank you.
Got it. Mike?
I will echo what Nora just said. I will echo everyone else. Some similar concerns, but nothing additional.
Okay, thanks. And I guess I think it won't come as a surprise, given that Steve said he and I have spent some time talking about these issues, that I'd kind of put myself in the same camp as Steve on this, that it does feel like there've been a lot of ad hoc things, and would be good if those were part of a process. I think I would be more comfortable with this change, Daryl, if or when it goes through that kind of process of personnel board, town administrator, and a careful kind of working through of what is the job description, what is the current job description, and then sorting out the exempt, not exempt issue, so that gets settled, and then that's off the table. And then I think coming to Jane's point, would be more possible to do an apples to apples comparison. I found the salary survey that the consultant did really interesting. I was a little frustrated by it because, as you've highlighted and others have, there are significant differences in how towns organize the public health function. I mean, I'm not the expert in this. That's you. But even to me, it's apparent that there are big differences, and that study didn't really cover that part of it. You've provided some really helpful information to me about how to interpret that, but that's a piece in terms of, with a clear job description, it might be possible for a consultant to be a little more finely tuned in comparisons to which of these other towns have the closest personnel to what it would be in our job description. And I think I could get a lot more comfortable with this in that circumstance.
Just so you know, I guess it wasn't in their relatively brief report, but the consultants said that they looked at more towns than what were presented there, and then they select the best matches. They use the job description that we have for Ellen, that is current and up to date, and they looked at the job descriptions in the other towns. So and then the towns that they chose to include for the salary comparisons were based on those similarities. And then what I sent you was the differences, even though the towns were as similar as they could get.
Right.
Actually, I should show you a chart of how many towns in Eastern Massachusetts are like Dover and Sherborn, relying as heavily on private well and septic, and there's 3, Dover, Sherborn, and Carlisle. So there are not a lot of towns like us to compare. They're out in the western part of the state more. In any case, so they chose the towns with the best matches on a variety of levels, especially job description and functions. And then other towns have salary ranges because they consider level of experience and stuff. And we just haven't had a turnover, so we have one data point.
Yeah, I guess I think I still got to the end of that study, and I guess there were still questions in my mind about the comparability, and that may just reflect my not having a full set of information. But that was the one piece in there that I guess I would have liked. It would have helped me to have seen a little more on that.
Okay, so maybe we could work with Diane and Jeremy, if Diane would be the best contact to ask the consultants to write up their methodology.
So I think, just kind of summarizing here, I think it sounds to me like there's considerable concern about this. So sounding to me like in the current form, this would have a hold in the public hearing to have a separate conversation and vote. Sounded like that was kind of the pretty strong sense of the room. It's 3 weeks away, so maybe there's some middle ground, something that could be worked out that might change that. But I think that's where things stand. That's what I've heard, and I think where things stand at this point.
I think this is a really complex topic to try to have a hold in a discussion at town meeting. So maybe Jeremy, you and I could talk about how to get it out of this sticky mess that it's in, to a point where people could vote.
Yeah, I think if if that can happen, that would, that would make things smoother. I think what you heard tonight, though, is given the current proposal and current understanding of how the process has evolved, I don't think, it doesn't sound to me like we're there yet, and maybe can get there in coming weeks. Okay, so that probably exhausts what we can effectively do on this topic for tonight.
I do,
just
Dan, if
want
I
to
can
know
just
what
jump
I'm going to
in.
be able to do
Steve, go ahead.
realistically.
Steve.
Yeah, I mean, my only concern, I think with Daryl, with what you're proposing is that we have a limited number of meetings between now and the public hearing. I mean, literally, we have 2 more meetings after tonight, and they're both chock full of basically all of the warrant articles that are not budgets. So, if you and Jeremy and Diane were to get together and work something out, the problem would be you wouldn't really have time to come back to advisory to be like, okay, this is our new plan, and it's easier pill to swallow. Can we do this instead and not have call a hold? I think probably you're just going to have to present that easier pill to swallow at the public hearing, and the only way that you can do that is for us to call a hold. One of the things about holds is that I think there's a stigma to a hold in that it always feels like, okay, we're going to hold this one because we don't like it and we want you to change it, but sometimes it's really just look, this budget is going up by 20%. Somebody's going to want to hear about it. If we don't hold it at the public hearing and talk about it, then someone's going to hold it at the town meeting, which is even worse than holding it at the public hearing. So if we can get it all settled at the public hearing, then hopefully nobody will call a hold it at the town meeting, if that makes sense. I mean, there's been times where I'm kind of like, I call a hold on something like the police budget. It was going up by a lot. There's a very good reason why it went up. There was a whole study. We advisory approved more staff, blah, blah, blah. And we just need to explain that so people know. And then boom, we're done with it. So if you and Jeremy and Diane can come up with something that's like, okay, this is an easy thing. This is our first step. It's small, but we have a whole plan for the future. And if you can kind of present that in a sort of easy to understand way, it's like, even if we're calling a hold on it, I don't think it has to be a long, protracted discussion with public comments, if that makes sense.
Okay. Jeremy, I'm going to be looking at you.
Okay. Can everybody still hear me? I was having a little Zoom trouble. Okay. All right. Steve, thanks for the process update. Very helpful and hopefully helps provide a path forward. Okay. So and Daryl, thanks for coming, talking to us and enduring lots of questions and comments. Appreciate that. Okay, so the last one that I had on my list was sustainability. Natalie had emailed me earlier today and raised some concerns about that. So Natalie, do you want to say a little bit about that to kind of get this started? Again, I messed up and I did not invite Gina or Dorothea tonight, so that's on me. So again, we don't need to make decisions tonight. It's just a question of whether this is something that we think would warrant further discussion at the public hearing or not.
I don't know. I guess I don't think it needs to warrant public discussion at the hearing because I don't think it's going to change anything. I was just reading the sustainability minutes from the surrounding towns and was just trying to wonder where we rank, like or where we're going with our sustainability dollars as opposed to what other people seem to be doing. I know, Framingham has a pilot program with Eversource to do geothermal heating in a whole neighborhood, and there's other people doing a lot of things in sustainability. And I was just going to comment or question on, like, are we moving forward enough with the money that we're paying in that area?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. Hold on a second, Michael. You know, I had the impression that when this came up before, that Natalie, some of the concerns you just highlighted were raised. I got the impression that that message was heard by Jeremy, Michael, and others, and was sort of taken on board in terms of, you know, thinking about plans going forward, which is why, you know, so anyways, you know, that was kind of what I had taken. Michael, quick.
Yeah, just a very quick thing. I'll just say that to deal with that, there's a annual report for 2022 that was just submitted to the town. That's quite lengthy in terms of some of the coordinator stuff. So that I will forward that to you, Dan, and you can share it with people.
So, yeah, because I guess those drafts were due recently, so it's not it's not published yet. But
I'll just ask Dorothea to make sure she does that, so that I don't get in the middle of that. But that's the only thing I'll just add.
Great. Okay, good. Thanks. I think that would be super helpful given the conversation that had come up before. Anybody else on the sustainability thing? I don't know if we necessarily need to go around the room unless somebody else wanted to add in on that. So that report will be helpful. And Natalie, thanks. Appreciate. You know, I think it's an important question to make sure that, you know, the town is getting what it should get from those efforts and those budget dollars. Anybody with any other items that on which we should be thinking about a hold and kind of getting ducks in a row for doing that? Steve, you'd mentioned, you know, any other items that went up a lot where there might be questions at town meeting and we should get on that now at the public hearing to talk about it, or any other items where people were thinking that budget just looks crazy. I'd want to call a hold on that at the public hearing.
Hang on, I'm just taking a quick look at the latest budget model just to see.
Great, good, thanks. I did not get a chance to do that earlier today, so that would be great. I'm giving a midterm in my intermediate macro class tomorrow, so I spent many hours today with somewhat stressed out students. But if you want to know about models of long run growth, I can connect you with some Wellesley students who are becoming experts on that. Jeremy, go ahead. You're still muted. Jeremy, you're still muted.
Thanks, Dan. Sorry about that. Not so much. Sorry to interrupt your discussion here, but I wanted to just chime in a little bit. Not so much an expense item for consideration and by vote per se, by advisory. However, Wendy, Deb, and I had a discussion this morning about overlay. And if you're not aware of what that is, overlay is sort of the reserves that are taken kind of off the top, if you will. It ends up sort of being a budget item. It's not one that you specifically vote as an advisory. However, it does have an impact on the tax rates, and it's an expense. We discussed this morning in your previous models, your previous financial models, your recent models. There was, sort of a placeholder, if you will, to add $250,000 for this coming fiscal year and the year after to overlay to increase the fund balance there, due to some litigation that's happening. Fortunately, that litigation has progressed, and we're now comfortable. Wendy and administration are comfortable with not adding to the overlay this year, or next year. So your budget model, you could update your forecast and remove the placeholder for adding $250,000 to overlay, which should be a positive thing for you.
Yeah, I think it's positive for everybody. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
So,
Steve,
and I know it's not on your agenda, so we can certainly discuss it and have, Wendy and Deb and I can prepare a bit more to talk about that, if you will, if you want, but just want, in the lead up to your public hearing, I just wanted to get that out there that we did have that conversation this morning and we're comfortable with that recommendation at this point.
And I gather the relevant utilities didn't file a new abatement application for this year. So
did not.
For whatever reasons, they've decided they're not going to.
The deadline has come and gone. They applied for an abatement in 2022, but did not this year. And these cases in other communities have now gone. The appellate tax board has punted, and they've gone to the courts, and the courts have actually made some decisions in town's favor in Springfield and a couple other communities. So things are going in a positive way.
That's the direction we like. Thank you. Glad to hear that. And Deb, Wendy, thanks for your work that it sounded like Jeremy was referencing on helping get that sorted out. Steve, see anything else?
I mean, so the budgets that are significantly increased, like ones that are going to catch the eye of the public, are IT is up 38%. So we might want to call a hold on that just so that maybe Klaus can give a general overview of IT. I think it's well known that that's a new department and it's in flux, but people are going to want to know. Town buildings is up 26%, and I think you, Dan, had indicated that we want to kind of hold that discussion at another time. But again, same problem as with Daryl. I'm not sure when we're going to hold that. If we're not just we're just gonna have it out at the public hearing, I guess.
Or we're going to stay up very late on Wednesday night.
Yeah. Let's see. Ambulance is up 13%. I guess it's your call whether you think that's even worth calling a hold. One of the tactics that I did one year when it looked like it was going to be a very long meeting was there were 2 or 3 budgets that were all going up, but I knew full well the reason why. And instead of calling a hold, I just tried to nip it in the bud at the beginning by saying, when introducing the omnibus, I said, I want to just kind of call out these 3 budgets. This one is going up 10%, and this is the reason why. This one's going up 8%, and this is the reason why. Ambulance feels like one of those ones where you can just kind of call it out at the very beginning and be like, we're essentially just catching up with and the shortfall that has been happening year after year. Building inspectors, kind of similar. They're up 11%. If I remember correctly, a lot of that was software related or something. I don't know that it's worth having Chris Canny have to give a whole little spiel about the inspector's budget, but you might want to just get the details on exactly what that was again. Yep. So you can explain it. Schools, I don't know what to do with the schools, because it's like with the schools, it's so much of it is going to be the contract, right? So we don't have to pretend like we don't know that that's going to be a major mover. But people like to talk about the schools.
And also the shift in the number of students from Sherborn and Dover, right, is another big hit there.
Yeah. And we know that for the Sherborn schools, a lot of it is the out of district cost, so maybe you want to try to just explain that away. It's always a toss up at the town meeting if people are going to call a hold on the schools, just because people like to talk about the schools. And then I think everything else was pretty small. I mean, cemeteries is going up 8.5%, but it's such a small budget that I just can't. Right. I just don't see the point of calling a hold on that.
I think they re-signed a contract thing. So
yeah. So other than that's really it. So
good. Okay. Well, so I'll give that some thought. My inclination will be to pick off a bunch of those and just try to explain it to people. Just, so that there's some possible chance of getting this meeting done in a day. And for the ones as you were describing, Steve, where there's a very clear story that I think most people, once they heard it, would say, yeah, that sounds reasonable. That may be an easier way to do some of those, though. You know, in some of these, as you know, if for instance we did a hold on the IT budget, you know, Klaus probably could explain that better than I could. So, you know, that one, maybe that's one where it'd be worth asking him to.
Yeah, I mean, he had his whole PowerPoint already, so.
Yeah, yeah.
The PowerPoint that he presented to us was very good. It was only like 4 slides, and I'm like, okay, this is great. So he can just do that at the public hearing, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And that might be and you know, I think it sounded like everyone on advisory was pretty supportive of that, and so you know, don't think that would be a controversial or difficult thing. It would just be, as you said, a chance to get the explanation out there. So I will do some thinking and strategizing about that. Anybody, before we leave this, anybody with any other thoughts or suggestions on kind of the public hearing and how we approach that? Okay, then well, we have a couple minutes to approve. Let me just mention slip a couple things in before we do that. So next meeting is March 1st, next Wednesday. We'll be working our way through warrant articles. Current plan is to do the first 16, and I will send the warrant around. I'll get the latest copy and send that around later this week to do the first 16 on the 1st, and then do the remaining ones on March 8th, the following Wednesday. And that March 8th includes the solar ground-mounted solar bylaw, which is long and complicated, and will take some time, I think, to have that explained and kind of work through what that all means. One other thing I just wanted to quickly check in on, I sent around that notice for the public hearing, which the town will send out in a week or so. It has all of our names on it because it is an announcement by the advisory committee about advisory's public hearing. Don't think there's anything controversial in that, but just if anybody had any concerns, wanted to give people just a chance to flag those. It's a repeat from last year with just updating dates and starting at 8:30 instead of 8:45, again, with the idea of trying to get done at a reasonable time later in the day. Okay, so I'll get with Jeannie and we'll get and so on, and we'll get that sorted out, and that'll get
Dan,
out. Yeah,
one
Peter.
request.
Yes.
Could you assign the warrant
Yes.
articles write-ups before?
Yes. Thank you, Peter. That's a perfect segue. I had 4 items on my list. I just gotten through item 3, and that was number 4. So Mike and Nora, since you haven't done this before, we'll have the public hearing, and then advisory puts together that report. And the way that we've done that is different warrant articles are assigned to different members of advisory, and that member advisory writes up the draft that summarizes what was advisory's view at the public hearing. Presumably for most of these, there will be maybe not a unanimous, but a majority view. And so the write-up would be the majority view. If there are dissenters who wish, they can write up a dissenting paragraph. I can also send around last year's report so that everybody has that as a model. The reason why what Peter suggested is so important is if we all know which items were responsible for, then in the public hearing can listen especially carefully, you know, and take good notes on those items so that, you know, it's not too burdensome to do the write-up. I know everybody listens 100% intensity all the time to every item, but nonetheless, it might be helpful to know that these are the handful that I'm going to be writing up a draft of. And I'll also mention that the timing is pretty tight. So after that public hearing, I'll send out some deadlines for when drafts need to be back to me, but it's a pretty tight turnaround because the report has to get, you know, completely proofread, assembled, consistent form, printed, and all the rest. So to get that ready in time for town meeting and sent out far enough ahead of town meeting, there's a pretty short deadline.
So when are you going to assign those to us?
I will do that this week so that by next Wednesday, when people are presenting to us, people will already know, hey, you know, I'm covering this article. So, you know, listen especially carefully in the presentation of that article at next week and March 8th meeting. I'll do that this week.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. That was a perfect setup. So unless anybody else has anything along those lines, let's do some minutes. We have both March 8th and March 15th. Give me a second to do a screen share of
February.
March 8th. Let's start with that. And here are minutes from March 8th. Give me just 1 second here to get my screen set up appropriately. Okay, I'll do the usual thing and scroll through these. These were Wasim's. Wasim put these together, so though he's not here, thanks to him for doing this. And then here's a question, I think, really for you, Peter, at the bottom. My understanding is that at this point, capital budget has approved, as of this meeting, which was the February 8th meeting, that capital budget had approved the 2 police vehicles, the fire vehicle, and capital requests for Pine Hill. The region, there were still some issues with, and the town buildings and all, there were still some issues with, hadn't been approved. Is that right, Peter? What's there?
The way Wasim described it, 2 vehicles, the Mustang and the pickup, the subordinate command vehicle for fire, and then the floors, or there was one item.
It was the EMS, the energy management system.
Energy management system for Pine Hill. Those were approved the night before this meeting, yes, by town.
Perfect.
Capital budget.
So I will then delete this. I'll do this later. I'll delete the comment so we get a clean set of minutes. Thanks, Peter. Let's just jump on to the next page and see if anybody has anything. I think Wasim did a nice job of getting a lot of information in here. I see one extra space there. I'll fix that. And on to almost last page.
Too much detail.
Yeah. Wasim, I like the detail. You know, could have edited that down, but I think, you know, it would have disappointed Wasim.
Just one small thing on the description of the, let's see, it's the second bullet point under the school discussion.
Yes.
I think actually negotiations will probably not be finalized by the time of the public hearing at all.
It says not going to be.
Well, it says until close to the public hearing, but I don't think.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Oh, so could I suggest negotiations started recently as expectations negotiations are not going to be finalized. We could just say for some time.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Count on me to
nice vague language.
Hey, you know, I spent 20 years at the Federal Reserve Board writing speeches for people where vague language is good. Vague language that comes easily to me.
You are rivaling the lawyers in the group because
yeah,
I mean Jane was Jane is the master of vague language in her minutes.
Hey, wide-ranging discussion. There's all kinds of good phrases that various people have come up with. Anything else that anybody saw? Okay. Motion to approve as edited on screen.
I move we approve as edited on screen the February 8th minutes.
Okay, second. Let's do a quick.
Second.
Thanks, Natalie. Let's do a quick roll call. Jane.
Aye.
Natalie.
Aye.
Nora.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Peter.
Aye.
And I'm aye as well. So that gets us 7-0 on these minutes. Thank you. Let me pop up the 2:15 minutes. Okay, should all be evident. Or should be visible. And this was our schools meeting.
One thing, the second, let's see, second bullet under other, first bullet under other districts have higher increases. I'm not sure what that refers to, but I don't think OOD is relevant at the region.
Oh,
I think that was with respect. She was saying that compared to the region, other school districts have much higher costs, budget increases than our school district does. And she said that the two of the reasons why she listed was other districts have much higher out of district costs, and they also have higher utilities costs. Essentially saying, look at how much better the region's budget is. So that's not referring to our school district. It's referring to outside districts.
So how about adjusting and saying just so we avoid any ambiguity, reflecting higher OD costs and higher. How's that look?
Sure.
James, seem okay?
Yeah, good.
Okay. Natalie, did you have a?
No, I have nothing to add.
Okay. What else do we need to adjust?
Maybe the second bullet on Sherborn schools, second bullet where it says have had to increase staffing paid for with non-resident tuition. Maybe just put in FY23, because I think that it was just that one time.
Okay.
That
good.
They really pay for it with that.
Okay, good. Thanks. Anything else? And thanks to Steve for putting these together. I think this is one of the more complicated meetings to keep track of and get everything written down for, since it's a lot of stuff that we don't deal with every day. Everybody good? Any other changes? Okay, motion to approve as amended on screen.
So moved. Second.
Great. Okay, so quick roll call. Peter.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Nora.
Aye.
Natalie.
Aye.
Jane.
Aye.
And I'm aye as well. So minutes approved 7-0. Okay, excellent. Unless anybody else has anything, last things to slip in, I think we're done. If somebody wants to move,
I move to adjourn.
Thank you, Natalie. Excellent. I'm going to start at the bottom of my screen. Mike.
Aye.
Nora,
Aye.
Natalie,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Jane,
Aye.
and I'm aye as well. So 7-0, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for slogging through to 9:22. It could have been worse. Thanks for slogging through. Look forward to seeing you all next week. Bye-bye.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you.
Night.
Good night.